Hello, my dear friends. My name is Margaret Chen, but most people call me Grandma Maggie. I'm 71 years old and I was born in Seattle, Washington in 1954. Today, I'm going to share something I've kept locked away for nearly 6 decades. A story that shaped every choice I made, every relationship I built, and every lesson I learned about survival. Before I begin, I want to thank each of you for being here. You may have noticed this is a new channel. Unfortunately, our previous YouTube channel was hacked, and despite all our efforts, we couldn't recover it. We lost everything. Our 15,000 subscribers, all our videos, years of work. It broke my heart. But your support is what gives me the courage to start over and speak these words aloud. If you were with us before, please help us rebuild by subscribing again. If you're new here, welcome to our family. Hit that notification bell, leave a like on this video, and comment telling me where you're watching from, whether it's Texas, Maine, California, or anywhere else in this beautiful world. Your support means everything as we grow this channel from the ground up once again. My story starts in the summer of 1968, when I was 14 years old. We lived in a cramped 2-bedroom house in the Beacon Hill neighborhood of Seattle. My father, David, worked nights as a janitor at the downtown hospital. My mother, Susan, cleaned houses for wealthy families in Capitol Hill during the day. Our paths rarely crossed. Dad sleeping while Mom worked, Mom resting while Dad was gone. I was the youngest of 4 children and the only daughter. My brothers, Michael at 21, Daniel at 19, and Kevin at 16, filled our small house with their presence. In Chinese families like ours, having sons was considered a blessing, and my father never let them forget it. But I was his treasure, his little lotus flower, as he called me in Cantonese. He'd bring me sesame candies from Chinatown, teach me characters in Chinese during his rare free hours, and promise that education would give me a better life than he'd had. But my father's love couldn't protect me from what lived inside our own home. It began on a humid evening in July. Mom had taken an extra shift cleaning a mansion in Madison Park. She'd be gone until midnight, she said. Dad was working his usual night shift. Your brothers will watch you, Mom told me in her accented English, adjusting her cleaning apron. You be good girl, Maggie. Do your homework. I was in our tiny kitchen washing rice for dinner when I felt someone standing too close behind me. It was Michael, the eldest. He'd always been the quiet one, the serious one who dropped out of college to help with family expenses. You're growing up, Maggie, he said, his voice strange and thick, turning into a woman. I tried to step away, but his hand caught my wrist. My heart started racing. Not the normal kind of fast, but the kind that tells you something is deeply wrong. Let go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I need to finish dinner. That's when Daniel walked in. I thought he'd help me, tell Michael to stop being weird, but the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. They'd planned this. Kevin appeared in the doorway moments later, blocking my only escape route. He was just 2 years older than me. We'd played together as children, shared secrets, fought over toys. Now he looked at me like I was something else entirely. Mom won't be back for hours, Daniel said, his voice emotionless, and Dad's at the hospital. What happened in that kitchen, and then in the small bedroom I'd shared with nothing but a curtain for privacy, destroyed something fundamental inside me. These were my brothers, the people who were supposed to guard me from the world's cruelty. Instead, they became the architects of my worst nightmare. When it was over, Kevin, the youngest of them, barely older than a child himself, leaned close and whispered words that would echo in my mind for decades. If you tell, no one will believe you. You're just a girl. We're the sons. Who do you think Dad will choose? I lay on the floor for what felt like hours after they left, unable to move, unable to cry, unable to process what had just happened. When I finally dragged myself to our bathroom, a cramped space with cracked tiles and a rust-stained sink, I scrubbed my skin until it was raw and bleeding, trying to wash away what couldn't be cleaned. Mom came home near 1 a.m. I'd managed to compose myself by then, had made dinner, had cleaned up, had pushed everything down into a dark place inside where I thought maybe I could forget it. You look tired. Maggie, she said, her own exhaustion evident in every line of her face. Go to bed. You have school tomorrow. Yes, Mama, I whispered. That night, I pushed my small dresser against the door, but when morning came and Mom left for work, Michael simply shoved it aside like it weighed nothing. Silly Maggie, he said with a smile that made my blood run cold. This is our house too. And so began months of calculated terror. They learned Mom's schedule better than she knew it herself. Mondays and Wednesdays she worked late at the Anderson estate. Tuesdays and Thursdays she did laundry for the Patterson family. Every Saturday she spent the entire day at the Kim household. And Dad. Dad was always gone, always working, always exhausted when he was home. They took turns keeping watch. One would be the lookout while the others did unspeakable things. They had a system, a routine, as if I was just another chore to be divided equally among them. I changed completely. The bright, chatty girl who'd loved school and friends became a ghost. I stopped eating properly, my body shrinking until my clothes hung loose. Dark circles appeared under my eyes, permanent shadows that no amount of sleep could erase. At Franklin High School, my grades collapsed. I'd been a straight-A student with dreams of college. My teachers called me their little star. Now I could barely focus long enough to finish a single page of reading. Margaret, what's happening to you? Mrs. Patterson, my English teacher, asked one afternoon after class. You used to be so enthusiastic, so bright. Now you're like a shadow, I wanted to tell her. God, how I wanted to tell her everything. But Kevin's words played on repeat in my head. Who do you think they'll believe? I started dressing differently. Oversized sweaters, even in Seattle's mild weather, baggy jeans, my hair cut short and shapeless. I tried to make myself invisible, unattractive, anything that might make them stop. But nothing worked. They began planting seeds of doubt with our parents. Maggie's been talking to older boys after school, Michael would say casually at dinner. I saw her laughing with some guy by the bus stop. Mom would look at me with worry and disappointment. This is not how good Chinese daughter behaves, she'd scold. What will people think? I'd start to protest. We saw you, Daniel would interrupt, his voice so earnest, so convincing. We're just worried about you, little sister. They were systematically isolating me, destroying my credibility before I ever tried to speak the truth. The only thing that kept me going was waiting for Dad's nights off. When he was home, they didn't dare come near me. My father, despite his gentle nature, had a protective streak when it came to me, if he ever knew. But how could I tell him? How could I destroy him by revealing that his sons, his pride, his legacy were monsters? Months dragged by. My body began showing signs of the damage they were inflicting. I had pain that made me double over in class, bleeding that wasn't normal, fevers that came and went without explanation. I grew weaker, paler, more hollow. One night in October 1968, after a particularly brutal attack by all three of them, I started hemorrhaging. The pain was unlike anything I'd experienced before, sharp and consuming, making the room spin. I passed out on the bathroom floor, surrounded by blood. Kevin found me first. I saw genuine panic in his eyes for the first time since this started. Michael, Daniel, get in here! He shouted. Oh God, I think we really hurt her this time. They carried me to my bed, cleaned up the blood, changed my clothes. For the first time, I saw fear in their faces. Not fear for me, but fear of consequences. If anyone finds out, we're done for, Michael said, his voice shaking. We'll say she fell down the back steps. Hit her head. That's why she's bleeding. They left me there, still bleeding, still in agony, too weak to even cry for help. By a miracle, I'll thank God for until my dying day. My father came home early that night. His shift had been cut short due to a power outage at the hospital. He came to check on me as he always did, turning on the light when he sensed something wrong. Maggie? Maggie, wake up, he called, his hand touching the blood-soaked sheets. His face went white. Susan, call ambulance, now. I opened my eyes and saw my father, my protector, my hero, staring at me with absolute terror. I tried to smile, tried to tell him I'd missed him, but only managed to whisper, "Baba, help me." Before everything went black, the rest is fragmented in my memory. Dad's voice screaming, Mom crying, the wail of sirens, the harsh fluorescent lights of Harborview Medical Center, doctors and nurses rushing around me, speaking in urgent tones I couldn't quite understand. But one phrase penetrated the fog. This child has been subjected to repeated sexual trauma. We need to contact the authorities immediately. The emergency room erupted. My father, my gentle, soft-spoken father, started breaking things, overturning chairs, shouting in a mix of English and Cantonese. It took 4 orderlies to restrain him. "Who did this?" he roared. "Who hurt my daughter?" My mother collapsed into a chair, rocking back and forth, keening in a high-pitched wail that didn't sound human. A social worker with kind eyes and a gentle voice approached my bed. "Margaret, I'm Dr. Richardson. I need you to tell me who did this to you. You're safe now. We can help you." I looked at my father, his face twisted in anguish. I looked at my mother, aged a decade in a single hour. How could I tell them the truth? How could I destroy our family completely? "Some boys," I whispered, the lie coming automatically. "After school. I don't know them. They were older. Not from our school." My first lie. It would be the foundation of many more. I spent 9 days in the hospital. The doctors performed emergency surgery. The internal damage was so severe they said I was lucky to survive. I might never be able to have children. They warned my parents gently. At 14 years old, that possibility had been stolen from me. During those 9 days, I never saw my brothers. Mom and Dad took shifts at my bedside, rarely leaving me alone. Dad held my hand while I slept, and when I woke, he was there, unshaven, exhausted, consumed by guilt. "I will find who did this," he promised in Cantonese, his voice breaking. "Even if I must search every street in Seattle." The police came repeatedly, asking the same questions. Each time I gave vague, useless answers. The detectives exchanged knowing looks. They knew I was lying, hiding something. But they couldn't force the truth from me. "Margaret, if you don't tell us the truth, these men could hurt other girls," a female officer said gently. "Please, help us protect others." Her words haunted me. But still, I stayed silent. The night before my discharge, I had an unexpected visitor. Mom had gone home to shower, and Dad had stepped out to get coffee. The door opened slowly, and Kevin slipped in. He looked terrible, gaunt, pale, with dark circles deeper than mine. He seemed to have aged years in just over a week. My first instinct was to scream, but he raised his hands in surrender. "Maggie, please. I need to tell you." He started crying, tears streaming down his face. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to. Michael and Daniel, they said if I didn't participate, if I didn't prove I was a man, they'd hurt me too. Make my life hell." I stared at him. This boy who'd helped destroy my innocence now reduced to tears. "Get out," I said, my voice flat. "Before Dad comes back. Dad suspects us. He's been asking questions, checking alibis." "Michael is terrified," Kevin said, moving toward the door. "You didn't tell them, did you?" "Get out. It's just, if you tell, Dad will kill us. Actually kill us. And then what? You'll have no family at all." He left before I could respond. And the terrible thing was, he was right. My father's love for me was absolute. If he knew the truth, there would be blood. I came home on a Sunday. Dad had repainted my corner of the bedroom, bought new sheets, installed a real lock on the door. Something our apartment had never had. "You have only key," he told me in his broken English, pressing it into my palm. "No one else. You are safe now." The first few days were surreal. My brothers barely showed themselves when I was in the common areas. They left early, came back late, avoided Dad's increasingly suspicious stares. Mom tried desperately to return to normal, cooking my favorite foods, brushing my hair like when I was small. But something was broken between us, something I didn't know how to repair. Dad extended his leave from work. "I no go back until you are safe," he declared, "until bad men are caught." But the bad men lived under our roof. The nightmares started immediately. I'd wake screaming, drenched in cold sweat, reliving every moment of horror. Dad would rush in, hold me, try to soothe me. Sometimes I'd be so hysterical they'd have to give me the pills the doctor prescribed. "Just dreams," Dad would say, wiping my tears. "Cannot hurt you, but they weren't dreams. They were memories." At school, rumors spread like wildfire. Although no one officially knew what happened, whispers followed me everywhere. "That's the girl who got attacked. I heard it was a gang. She's so weird now, like broken." Friends didn't know how to act around me. Some avoided me entirely. Others offered pity so thick it felt suffocating. I began eating lunch alone, sitting in the library during breaks, avoiding eye contact with everyone. At home, the tension grew unbearable. Dad's suspicions intensified. I'd hear him and Mom arguing late at night. "Something is wrong with this story, Susan," Dad said in Cantonese one night, his voice carrying through our thin walls. "The boys act guilty. Too guilty." "They're just worried about their sister," Mom insisted, but her voice wavered. "Daniel cannot look at me. Kevin jumps when I enter room. And Michael has eyes of someone hiding terrible secret. You're imagining things because you're tired, stressed." "I will discover truth," Dad interrupted, "one way or another." I lay in my bed, heart pounding, knowing that discovery was inevitable. And when it came, it would destroy everything. The truth emerged on a cold November afternoon, nearly 4 months after my hospitalization. Dad came home early from a doctor's appointment. He'd been to see a cardiologist about chest pains. He walked into the living room where Michael was cornering me, his hand tight on my arm. "You need to keep that mouth shut. Or get your hand off my daughter," Dad said, his voice deadly calm. Michael jumped back like he'd been electrocuted. Dad was holding a folder of medical documents. "I went to hospital today," Dad said, his English suddenly more precise than I'd ever heard it. "Got copies of Maggie's records. Wanted second opinion from specialist." He threw the folder on our worn coffee table, papers scattering. "You know what doctor wrote? That injuries were from repeated abuse. Not one time, many times. Months." He turned to me, tears in his eyes. "Why you lie, Maggie? Why you protect who hurt you?" "Dad, she's confused," Michael started. "Trauma can—" "Shut up!" Dad roared. "I heard you just now. Keep your mouth shut." What must she keep secret? The door opened and Daniel walked in, stopping dead when he saw the scene. "Good. You here too," Dad said, that terrible calm back in his voice. "I want talk to all 3 sons. Where is Kevin?" "I don't know," Daniel said, his voice trembling. "Doesn't matter." Dad moved toward me, taking my hands. "Maggie, my lotus flower, you must be brave now. You must tell truth. All of it." I looked at Michael, his face filled with hatred. At Daniel, pale as death. I thought of Kevin, hiding somewhere, knowing this moment would come. "It was them, Baba," I whispered in Cantonese. "My brothers." Dad closed his eyes like he'd been shot. When he opened them, something in him had changed forever. "How long?" he asked, his voice breaking. "Since July. When you were working nights?" 5 months, he whispered. Oh God, 5 months. What happened next was like an explosion. My father, my gentle, kind father, became someone I didn't recognize. He lunged at Michael with a roar that shook the walls. The first punch sent Michael crashing into our small television. Mom came running from the bedroom, screaming. Daniel tried to pull Dad away and took a blow that broke his nose. Blood sprayed across our worn carpet. Neighbors called the police. By the time they arrived, Dad was being held back by 3 men from our building. Michael was bleeding on the floor. Daniel was slumped against the wall, holding his face. The police separated everyone. One of them, an older sergeant named Morrison, Knew our family from the neighborhood. David, what happened here? My sons, Dad said, his voice hollow. My own sons. They are the ones. They hurt Maggie. And then I told them everything. Every detail. Every assault. Every threat. It poured out of me like poison that had been festering for months, and once I started, I couldn't stop. When I finished, Sergeant Morrison turned to Michael and Daniel. "You're under arrest. What about Kevin?" a younger officer asked. "Him too," I said quietly, but he was forced by the others. They threatened him. As if summoned, Kevin appeared in the doorway. He'd heard everything. "It's true," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I did it. I was part of it. I deserve to be arrested too." Dad looked at all three of his sons, his pride, his legacy, and said simply, "You are no longer my children. None of you." They were taken away in handcuffs. Before the police car pulled away, Kevin looked back at me through the window, mouthing, "I'm sorry." But sorry couldn't fix what was broken. The trial came quickly. There was medical evidence, my testimony, Kevin's confession. Michael was sentenced to 15 years. Daniel got 12 years. Kevin, as a minor who cooperated with authorities, received 7 years in juvenile detention. Our family fell apart. The story made local news. Brothers arrested in family abuse case. We became the neighborhood scandal, the whispered about family. Dad was never the same. The gentle man who'd called me his lotus flower became a hollow shell, consumed by guilt. "I should have noticed," became his constant refrain. "I should have been home more, should have protected you." Mom fell into severe depression, spending days in bed unable to function. Her hair turned completely gray within 3 months. "How did I not see?" she'd whisper. What kind of mother doesn't protect her child? In January 1969, we left Seattle. Dad transferred to a hospital in Portland, Oregon, 2 hours south. We left behind our apartment, our neighborhood, our entire life. We tried to outrun the shame, the memories, the pain. But as I learned, you can't outrun what lives inside you. Portland was different. A smaller city, quieter, less crowded. We rented a small house in the Selwood neighborhood near the river. I enrolled in a new high school where no one knew my story. Dad took a day shift position so he could be home at night. Mom got a job at a Chinese restaurant working during lunch hours. For the first time in years, my parents were actually present. But presence couldn't heal what had been broken. The nightmares continued. Every night I'd wake up screaming, feeling hands that weren't there. Dad would run to my room, hold me until I stopped shaking, sometimes staying all night in a chair beside my bed. "It will pass," he'd promise. With time, but it didn't pass. The nightmares evolved, became more vivid, more terrible. I started taking sleeping pills, but they only trapped me in the dreams, unable to wake up. After several horrifying nights, I stopped taking them entirely. At Lincoln High School, I tried to blend in. I kept my head down, avoided making friends, built walls so high around myself that no one could get close. "You never talk about your old school," a girl named Rachel said one day. "Do you miss Seattle?" "No," I said flatly. "There's nothing there I miss. What about your family? Any siblings?" "I don't want to talk about it. They gave up trying to know me. I became known as the weird girl, the unfriendly Chinese girl who sat alone at lunch." At home, we existed in a bubble of careful silence. We never mentioned my brothers, never said their names, acted as if they'd never existed. But their absence was a constant presence, a void that consumed all joy. I'd hear Mom crying at night, Dad trying to comfort her. "They were my babies, David," she'd sob. "I gave birth to them, raised them. How did they become monsters?" "I don't know," Dad would say, his voice tired. "I don't know anything anymore." 2 years after we moved, a letter arrived from the juvenile facility. It was from Kevin. Dad wanted to burn it unopened. Mom begged to read it. I stood frozen, staring at the envelope that had the power to rip open all our wounds. "It's addressed to Maggie," Mom said quietly. She should decide. I took the letter with trembling hands and put it in my pocket without reading it. I carried it for weeks, unable to decide what to do. Finally, one Sunday afternoon when my parents were at the Chinese community center, I opened it. The letter was 4 pages long, his handwriting cramped and uneven. He wrote about guilt, about nightmares that mirrored mine, about wishing he could turn back time. He wrote about therapy, about trying to understand how he could have done something so terrible. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He said he knew he didn't deserve it. He just wanted me to know he was sorry, truly sorry, and that he'd spend the rest of his life trying to make amends. I folded the letter carefully and put it in a box under my bed. I never responded, but I didn't destroy it either. Years passed slowly. I graduated high school with mediocre grades. I was no longer the straight-A student I'd once been. I enrolled in Portland Community College, unsure what I wanted to do with my life. That's where I met James. He was studying accounting, a quiet Chinese-American student who sat next to me in Economics 101. We started studying together, then getting coffee, then spending hours talking about everything except our pasts. James never pushed. He noticed my boundaries and respected them. When I flinched if someone touched me unexpectedly, he simply gave me more space. When I said I wasn't ready to date, he said he was happy just being friends. One evening, we were walking along the Willamette River when he said, "Something hurt you badly, didn't it?" I stopped walking, my heart racing. "You don't have to tell me," he continued quickly. "I just want you to know that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here to listen." That simple statement, no pressure, no demands, cracked something open inside me. Our relationship progressed slowly over 2 years. Each small step forward, holding hands, a first kiss, meeting my parents, felt like a victory. My parents, especially Dad, were suspicious at first, but James's patience and respect gradually won them over. "He has good heart," Dad finally admitted. "He treats you with honor." In 1973, I received news that shattered the fragile stability I'd built. Michael and Daniel were being released early for good behavior. The letter from the Department of Corrections said they'd served 9 years of their sentences. They were prohibited from contacting me, but they were free. The panic attacks started immediately. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, jumped at every shadow. What if they found me? What if they wanted revenge for the years they'd spent in prison? James noticed but didn't push. He just stayed close, offering quiet support. Finally, one night, I told him everything. The whole story, from beginning to end. Every awful detail I'd kept locked inside for 8 years. He listened without interrupting, holding my hand, tears streaming down his face. When I finished, he pulled me into his arms. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he said, "and I love you. Nothing you've told me changes that." That acceptance, that unconditional love, began my real healing. With James's support, I made a decision. I would write to my brothers. Not to reconcile, but to reclaim my power. To tell them on my terms that I'd survived, that they hadn't destroyed me. To Kevin, I wrote about how his participation, even under pressure, had hurt me. How I'd spent years trying to understand how someone I'd trusted could betray me so completely. I ended with, "I don't hate you anymore, but I can't fully forgive you either. What I can do is wish you peace and hope you never cause harm again." To Daniel, I wrote about anger and disappointment, about how the middle brother I'd looked up to had chosen cruelty. I told him I never wanted contact, but that I wouldn't live in fear of him anymore. To Michael, I wrote the hardest letter. "You orchestrated my nightmare. You stole my childhood, my innocence, my sense of safety. For years you controlled me through fear. But that ends now. You have no power over me anymore." I mailed all 3 letters the same day, then stood at the mailbox and cried. Not from sadness, but from release. James proposed 2 months later. "I don't have much," he said, showing me a simple ring. but I promise to spend my life making you feel safe and loved. We married in 1974, a small ceremony with my parents and a few close friends. Dad walked me down the aisle, tears in his eyes. "You deserve every happiness," he whispered. Our life together started in a modest apartment in Northeast Portland. James worked as an accountant. I became an elementary school teacher. I wanted to protect children the way no one had protected me. Physical intimacy was challenging, as we'd both expected. There were nights of panic attacks, of painful memories surfacing, but James never pressured me, never showed frustration. He waited, loved me the way I could accept. In 1976, I discovered I was pregnant. Given what the doctors had said about my ability to have children, it felt like a miracle. I was terrified, afraid I wouldn't know how to be a mother, how to protect a child when I couldn't protect myself. "We'll figure it out together," James promised. Our daughter Sarah was born in April 1977. Holding her for the first time, I made a silent vow. I would protect her always. Being a mother healed something in me I didn't know was broken. Watching Sarah grow, completely trusting me, showed me I was stronger than I thought. When Thomas was born in 1980, and then Jennifer in 1984, our family felt complete. My parents, especially Dad, found new life through the grandchildren. He was the loving grandfather he was always meant to be. In 1988, another letter came from Kevin. I almost threw it away without opening it. But curiosity won out. He wrote about rebuilding his life, finishing his education, finding stable work, meeting someone who knew his past and accepted him anyway. He did therapy regularly and volunteered with organizations that helped abused children. "Your letter changed my life," he wrote. "Your words made me truly see the harm I caused. I'm not asking to return to your life. I just wanted you to know your words didn't fall on empty ears." I showed James, who read it silently. "What do you want to do?" he asked. After thinking for days, I wrote back, not to resume contact, but to acknowledge his efforts at redemption. I gave no details about my life, no photos, no address, just a brief note saying I'd survived and built a good life. He responded once, thanking me. I never wrote again, and he respected my silence. I learned through my parents that Michael had died in a car accident in 1995. Daniel had moved somewhere down south and lost contact with everyone. Life continued. My children grew into wonderful adults, married, gave me 7 grandchildren. James and I grew old together, our love deepening into something unshakable. Dad passed away in 2001, at peace knowing I was safe and happy. Mom followed him 3 years later, dying quietly in her sleep. In 2015, at age 61, I did something I never thought I'd do. I agreed to meet Kevin. Not for him, for me. To close that chapter once and for all. We met at a quiet cafe in downtown Portland. He was completely different. Gray-haired, weathered, wearing reading glasses. He didn't look anything like the teenager from my nightmares. We talked for nearly 2 hours about our lives, our families, our regrets. There were no hugs, no promises to keep in touch. It was simply closure, turning the page definitively. "Were you able to be happy, Maggie?" he asked as we prepared to part. Despite everything, I thought of James, of Sarah, Thomas, and Jennifer, of my 7 grandchildren, of the life we'd built. "Yes," I answered honestly, very happy. And that was my greatest victory, not letting those months of horror define my entire existence. Choosing life, love, and happiness despite the scars. Today, at 71, I look back and see a difficult path that was worth traveling. I'm a grandmother, a retired teacher who helped hundreds of children, a woman who learned that even the deepest wounds can heal. My dear friends, thank you for listening to my story. If I'm sharing this after so many years of silence, it's because I believe it can help someone going through something similar. There is hope. There is a path beyond the pain. If you're in your own valley of shadows, remember, you're stronger than you know. Healing is slow and difficult, but possible. Thank you for reaching 15,000 subscribers. Please leave a like on this video, subscribe to Wisdom Stories, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future stories. A loving embrace from Grandma Maggie. Until next time.